Good day, everyone. A blessed Saturday to all of us. It is an honor and a privilege for me to become one of the presenters for the Asian Scholars Network's CLIBES 2021. My name is Joseph Angelou and I come from the neighboring country, the Philippines. And I am here to present to you the results of my study entitled The Mediating Effect of Psychological Capital on Authentic Leadership and Organizational Commitment among Catholic Higher Education Institutions in Batangas. I made this study as a graduate school student of the Batangas State University for my dissertation. But actually, my affiliation is with De La Salipa, which is one of the leading higher education institutions in the Calabarzon region of the Philippines. So to start with, Catholicism, one of the foremost religions in the world, has not only shaped faith teachings and traditions, but likewise education. Catholic education does not only intend to provide the best quality of education to its students, but also to ensure that Catholic teachings are integrated into the curriculum, either from the basic education up to the higher education levels. In the Philippines, we are now celebrating the 500th year of Catholicism in our country, as the Philippines is one of the colonies of the Spaniards for more than 300 years. And the presence of Catholic education from the basic education levels up to the higher education levels can never be underestimated even at present. So there are actually two major types of higher education institutions in the Philippines. They are of the public higher education institutions and also the private higher education institutions. And those that are managed and operated by Catholic groups are considered to be sectarian higher education institutions, apart from those previously privately owned by other organizations which are considered to be non-sectarian. In March of 2018, the Philippine government, in its thrust to concretize the principle of education for all, signed Republic Act 10931, or otherwise known as the Universal Access to Quality Tertiary Education, or what we now call as UWACTEA, or the UWACTEA law. The UWACTEA law gave poor Filipino teenagers who are entering college the chance to have full scholarship in public higher education institutions. While this law becomes enticing, especially for a lot of Filipino students, it actually puts private higher education institutions at a disadvantaged position. Due to the implementation of Republic Act 10931, it brought compromise to the decreased enrollment in private higher education institutions and the migration of teachers previously employed in private higher education institutions to those to transfer to the public higher education institutions because of higher salary and higher funding as brought about by this law. So, extraordinary times and challenges, just like what the UWACTEA brought forward, call for both effective leadership and commitment or employee commitment among those working in private higher education institutions. Because it has been found out recently, just in 2019 in the Philippines, the common challenges that private Catholic higher education institutions encounter include decreased enrollment, increased migration of teachers to public higher education institutions, and then private Catholic higher education institutions always needing to maintain moral leadership and to challenge sometimes the principles of the government, because we know that there must always be a distinction between the religion and the state. So private Catholic higher education institutions need to be firm in their conviction to always exercise moral leadership. And lastly, Catholic higher education institutions in the Philippines always need to become beacons of hope despite difficult situations, just like what we are experiencing right now during the COVID-19 pandemic. With all of these information, this study aims to delve deeper into the levels of authentic leadership and organizational commitment among the employees of Catholic higher education institutions, particularly in one province, and that will be the province of Batangas, included in the Calabarzon region of the Philippines. So for the statement of the problem, we have 7 questions that had to be answered through this study. The first one will be on the level, how may the level of organizational commitment be described among the employees of the Catholic HEIs? And then number 2, what would be the level of perception of the employees on the level of authentic leadership among their immediate heads? And then we also look into the level of psychological capital among the employees in terms of the 4 dimensions of psychological capital, namely efficacy, hope, resilience, and optimism. We also look as to whether there is the perceived level of authentic leadership affects the organizational commitment of the respondents who are employees in Catholic HEIs. And then we look into the mediating role of psychological capital in the effect of authentic leadership to organizational commitment. The 6th question explores on the perceptions and insights of these employees regarding the importance of authentic leadership and organizational commitment. And lastly, based on the results of the study, a proposed HR module or human resource module on leadership for business sustainability will be put forward. So this study engages Catholic HEIs in the province of Batangas. In the whole province of Batangas, there are only 6 Catholic higher education institutions, namely De La Salipa, the Immaculate Conception College in Balayan, La Consolacion College in Tanawan, St. Bridget College in Batangas City, St. Joseph College in Rosario, and Santa Teresa College in Bawan, Batangas. For the research design, the method used is descriptive research, but the specific design that has been employed was explanatory sequential mixed method design. So this study actually entails the acquisition of both quantitative and qualitative data. And then the respondents are 146 male and female full-time college employees from the Catholic higher education institutions who do not hold any administrative position at the time that this study was conducted. And among these 146, 8 further participated as the interviewees of the qualitative phase conducted as part of this mixed method research. And the employees can further be divided into 3 major groups. Namely, they either fall on the academic teaching personnel, academic support personnel, or non-academic personnel. So as you see on this table, the total population is 232, and by employing Slovin's formula and using stratified random sampling with proportionate allocation, the sample size was computed at 146, making sure that each school has been well represented in their number of target respondents. And then, these will be the table showing to us the profiles of the respondents. So we see here that majority of the respondents are females belonging to middle adulthood age range. They are mostly academic teaching personnel or faculty members. Their years of service in the Catholic higher education institutions are highest from 5 to 15 years or below 5 up to 15 years, and then most of them are master's degree holders. So the data gathering instrument that has been used is a survey questionnaire. It actually consists of a page for the informed consent of the front page, and then the second page will be getting the profile of the respondents as you have seen presented in the previous slide. And then the next pages entail adapted questionnaires, each for organizational commitment, authentic leadership, and psychological capital. So the commitment scale by Mayer, Allen, and Smith was used for organizational commitment, the authentic leadership questionnaire by Avolio, Gardner, and Wallumbwa for authentic leadership, and lastly, the PsyCap 24 questionnaire for psychological capital as devised by Luthans, Avolio, and Avi. So, I as the researcher asked for permission to use all of these questionnaires in my study, and they have been granted by the University of Ontario, and then also the Authentic Leadership Questionnaire and the PsyCap questionnaire were given by the approval of Mind Garden, which is an international publishing company. So here we see the data gathering procedure. So this is a mixed method research. It started off with the conduct of a survey, either in print or online using Google Forms. And then quantitative data collection entailed the use of the survey. And then we did statistical treatment of data using IBM SPSS. So that will be to analyze the quantitative data. And after analysis of the quantitative data, we constructed follow-up interview questions to go to the third phase, which would entail the qualitative data collection through the conduct of semi-structured interviews. And then to analyze the worded data coming from our respondents, we did coding and categorizing with the use of the IBM SPSS text analytics software. And then lastly, to integrate the quantitative and qualitative data, we used a joint display table which helps present both the quanti and the quali data together with the use of a meta-inference to integrate their results. As to the statistical treatment of data, we used frequency and percentage, weighted mean, linear regression, and then Baron and Kenny mediation analysis. So now, these are the interview questions that have been explored during the conduct of the semi-structured interviews. So we looked into the importance of commitment to the Catholic HEIs, the importance of open communication between leaders and followers. And we also looked into the insights of the interviewees regarding the most important qualities that leaders must possess. And then we also looked into the effect of leadership to their commitment. And then lastly, as to whether skills and capacities are important factors of commitment. Now let's go to the results of the study. So I'll just be going through them quickly. Here we see that the employees or the respondents have high commitment as evidenced by a mean score of 5.14, which is interpreted as high commitment. So if we look at the three dimensions of organizational commitment, we see it highest in affective commitment, followed by normative commitment, and lastly, continuance commitment. So both the top two mean scores fall on high commitment, and then the third one on moderate commitment. So basically speaking, we see a high level of commitment as all of the interpretations fall on the positive range. And then we also have the overall assessment on authentic leadership. The employees perceive a very high level of authentic leadership among their immediate heads with a mean score of 4.10, and we see that the four subdimensions of authentic leadership also fall equally on very high. Highest on balanced processing and relatively lowest on relational transparency. Next, we look into the details of the four subdimensions of psychological capital. In terms of the first subdimension, which is efficacy, we see that the efficacy of the respondents or the employees fall on high. So they have high efficacy. They also have high hope. And then we also have high resilience. And then lastly, a high level of optimism. So here we see a high level of optimism. So if we look at the overall assessment of psychological capital, we also see it falling on high as evidenced by all of its subdimensions correspondingly falling on high also with their mean scores. And then, we now look into the effect of authentic leadership on organizational commitment. As the p-value is less than 0.05, It means to say that authentic leadership has a significant effect on organizational commitment. By way of the beta coefficient, we see the beta coefficient to be a positive value. We then could say that the effect of authentic leadership on organizational commitment is both positive and significant. The next table is on the parallel mediation analysis of psychological capital in the effect of authentic leadership to organizational commitment. So this is quite a long table because it consists of 6 models or 6 steps to arrive at the multiple regression analysis towards the end. So just to be able to show to you the first 5 models, the first one was the effect of authentic leadership to organizational commitment, which we have already seen to be significant and positive. So just to be able to show to you models 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then we'll go back to model 6 later on. So for model 2, we see a significant effect of authentic leadership to efficacy, also to hope, by virtue of the p-values which are all less than 0.05, and also to resilience and optimism, all of which are evident, showing to us that authentic leadership has a significant effect on these dimensions of psychological capital. As we have seen significant effects to all of the first 5 models, this brings us to the multiple regression analysis towards the end. But in contrast, by way of the effect of authentic leadership, by way of the 4 sub-dimensions of psychological capital, has been found to be not significant. So this gives us the idea that psychological capital does not mediate the relationship of authentic leadership to organizational commitment. Put in other words, psychological capital does not mediate the effect of authentic leadership to organizational commitment. So this also just shows to us the parallel analysis model. So this is the total effect, and then the indirect effect of authentic leadership by way of psychological capital to organizational commitment shows to us that all values are greater than 0.05, telling us that really there will be no significant mediation happening in terms of psychological capital when we look at the relationship between authentic leadership and organizational commitment. So we also had the qualitative phase. So these are just screenshots of the analysis made through the IBM SPSS text analytics. So here we see that these were the themes that have been generated through the IBM SPSS text analytics. And then the joint display table integrating the quantitative data, the qualitative data, going to the meta-inference. So we highlighted some of the results of the quantitative data, comparing them with the results of our qualitative data through the use of super themes that are put in bold, and then we also made a meta-inference. And then lastly, the proposed output of this study is an HR module on leadership. As this is intended for Catholic higher education institutions, we tried to look into the use of the Bible to create an HR module on leadership. Hence the term parableed, or the parables on leadership. So this is a 5-part leadership module for the administrators of Catholic HEIs based on the parables of Jesus Christ. So for the conclusion, we could therefore say that there is a high level of commitment, organizational commitment, by the employees to the organizations they work for. We see a very high level of perceived authentic leadership among the immediate heads of the Catholic HEIs. We also see a high level of psychological capital, a positive and significant effect of authentic leadership to organizational commitment. And then psychological capital does not mediate the effect of authentic leadership to organizational commitment. We see the importance of authentic leadership and organizational commitment as perceived by our respondents. And then lastly, the HR module on leadership could be a useful tool to enhance leadership and commitment, integrating teachings coming from Jesus Christ as the founder of the Catholic religion. So lastly, for the recommendations, so here are some recommendations. This study puts forward that higher education institutions should implement employee development programs. They must give more opportunities for their employees to be sent to relevant training programs. And then educational institutions, through their HR departments, must also implement periodic recognition activities to instill more commitment among their employees. And then Catholic HEIs must promote the practice of authentic leadership among their school heads by way of using the teachings of the Catholic faith in the management of their institutions. And then for further studies, this study recommends the conduct of researches to assess the effects of other variables that might have an effect on commitment, and then similar studies in Catholic basic education institutions, because we only did this for higher education institutions, and even to other types of organizations such as healthcare and manufacturing industries. And then lastly, identify what other variables can possibly mediate the relationship between authentic leadership and organizational commitment, as we have not seen a significant mediation of psychological capital in the process. So as we say it in Filipino, maraming salamat po. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something from my study, and hopefully this inspires you to create a similar study that also focuses on leadership, commitment, and psychological capital. Mabuhay po tayong lahat. Maraming salamat po.